Just like the independence movements in Scotland, Quebec, and Catalonia, the United States also has its own version of all these political shenanigans. Look at this.
Texas gets one step closer to leaving U.S.
Yes, just as the title says. Although it may be hard to believe, Texas has its own independence movement. A nostalgic one, harking back to that independent Texas that managed to separate from Mexico in 1836 and disappeared in 1845 with the accession to the United States. In fact, like Brexit, the Texas case is already known to some as Texit. And keep this in mind because this is no accident. The movement is small, but it is gaining strength. And events such as those that have taken place in the last few weeks are not exactly helping to dampen the spirit.
Border standoff between Texas feds intensifies as governor defies Supreme Court ruling.
Exactly. The Texas government and the Biden administration have begun 2024 embroiled in a fierce dispute over the control of the Texas-Mexico border. The situation is red hot. Now, what exactly is happening on the Texas border to fuel an independence movement? Why does Texas want to take control of its borders? Could immigration be the straw that breaks the camel's back and end a well-established independence movement? Well, we're going to tell you all this and more in this video. Stay tuned.
The eternal border crisis.
If you've been paying attention to the news lately, I'm sure you've seen dozens of images and headlines about the US-Mexico border. And no wonder, Uncle Sam is suffering one of the worst border crises in recent decades, if not in its entire history. Since Joe Biden took the reins of the White House in January 2021 until last December 2023, the Border Patrol has intercepted more than 6 million people. Yes, that's correct. 6 million. That's equivalent to an entire country like Denmark, wanting to illegally enter the United States in the space of less than 3 years. As you can imagine, given such a situation, the border authorities are overwhelmed. In December 2023 alone, they have processed 10,000 people per day. Crazy. What's more, according to Department of Homeland Security data, between 1.5 and 2 million undocumented immigrants have crossed the border illegally during the same period. As a result, Biden has been accused by the Republican Party of promoting an open borders policy. Now, is this really true? Well, no. Not at all. While it is true that accepted asylum claims have grown relative to the Trump era, this is mostly because applications have simply skyrocketed. In fact, broadly speaking, Biden is pursuing an immigration policy that is pretty consistent with that of the Trump administration. For example, his administration has maintained the agreement with Mexico, whereby those deported by the United States are taken directly to its southern neighbor. What's more, investment in border and customs security has also remained in the region of $15 billion annually, and has even gone above this record figure in some years. But then many of you may be wondering, what on earth is going wrong? Why have immigrant arrivals at the southern border of the United States skyrocketed so much? Well, VisualPolitik viewers, the reasons are not to be found within the United States. Just take a look at this graph. The situation in countries south of the US border is worsening in some cases. Corruption, violence, and poverty are unfortunately still the norm in countries such as Mexico, Venezuela, and in regions such as the Northern Triangle, especially Guatemala and Honduras. Perhaps only El Salvador is spared from this negative trend that is being seen lately in Ibero-America. On top of that, those of you who have heard about the recent crisis of violence that Ecuador is going through will surely know where this is headed. In recent years, news like this has only multiplied.
Extreme poverty in the region rises to 86 million in 2021 as a result of the deepening of the social and health crisis derived from the COVID-19 pandemic. Latin America struggles with a new wave of crime.
Unlike Trump, who simply criminalized immigrants, Biden has tried to tackle this crisis by focusing on the causes of illegal immigration. That is, corruption, poverty, and a lack of security. For example, high-ranking Central American officials involved in major corruption cases have been sanctioned in what is known as the Engel List. Vice President Kamala Harris, who is in charge of immigration policy in this administration, has also pushed for an investment program of more than $4 billion. However, for many, all this is proving to be useless, a waste of time and money. Not surprisingly, the problem with betting on this type of strategy is that the results are not exactly fast. Perhaps it could be a good idea in the medium and long term, but not before. And the issue is that Americans are anxious to get solutions. And this is exactly where Texas appears with its governor, Republican Greg Abbott, to put its foot down. Listen up.
Abbott versus Biden.
Remember we told you that between 2021 and 2023, the US had intercepted 6 million immigrants at its border. Well, almost 60% of them were intercepted on Texas soil. That is why, in 2021, the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, launched Operation Lone Star. With this initiative, the Texas government deployed its National Guard and other state security agencies to the border. And so Texas began to take its own action measures, such as deploying large underwater barriers with buoys in the Rio Grande to prevent migrants from passing through the river. And that's not all. In December 2023, he also signed a law allowing state police to detain immigrants entering illegally across its border. And furthermore, according to this law, the state's own judges could also order their deportation, something that, in the United States, is carried out by specific judges of the Department of Justice. And yes, as you are most likely thinking, that is quite a challenge against the federal government. And as if that wasn't enough, it all blew up over a specific action Abbott took in September 2023. The deployment of more than 70,000 rolls of barbed wire at the hands of the Texas National Guard.
Most of the barbed wire was installed in the Texas border town of Eagle Pass, on the U.S. bank of the Rio Grande, to prevent illegal immigrants from entering. From the beginning, the U.S. Border Patrol complained, considering it was an obstacle to its tasks, such as saving immigrants who were drowning in the river. So, the Border Patrol decided to start cutting the Texas National Guard wire, and as a result, the state of Texas began to sue the Border Patrol and the Biden administration in court, demanding that they immediately stop destroying the wire, and that battle was won by the Texans.
However, one battle won does not spell victory in the whole war. The conflict with the federal government has only just begun, and for proof, listen to this.
Feds say Texas is blocking Border Patrol from a section of the border. Ask U.S. Supreme Court to intervene. The Justice Department says agents can't access 2.5 miles of the border and an exit ramp in Eagle Pass.
Yes, the Texas National Guard fenced off an entire park in the city of Eagle Pass and denied entry to the Border Patrol. The Biden administration's reaction was swift. They presented documents to the Supreme Court demonstrating the importance of this access for helping immigrants who had encountered problems crossing the river and were in danger of drowning.
And no wonder. On January 12th, a Mexican woman drowned with her 2 minor children on the shores of Eagle Pass. With such immense pressure, the Supreme Court finally decided to allow the Border Patrol to remove all the barbed wire, since it has jurisdiction over the entire border territory of the country. What they did not do, however, was prohibit the Texas National Guard from continuing to deploy it, something the governor himself has said they will continue to do.
The thing is, at the time of making this video, the National Guard has not yet given the Border Patrol access to the Eagle Pass Park. They believe they will turn it into another entry point for illegal immigration. And in this sort of war between Texas and the federal government, Governor Abbott is not exactly alone. Nearly every Republican governor in the country, and even Donald Trump himself, have supported this decision and Abbott's stance. In fact, they have even increased the dispatch of soldiers from their own National Guards to support the Texan governor. As you can see, the situation is red hot. The old independent Texan spirit is making its presence felt in a way it hasn't done in a long time, and many are already talking about a possible Texas secession if this ends up going too far. The question is, would this really be possible? Could Texas secede from the United States? Well, let's take a look.
On the way to Texas,
Abbott's actions on the immigration enforcement and the clash with Washington, D.C. authorities are in some ways fueling the Texas nationalist movement. And if you don't believe me, take a look.
How Greg Abbott's border fight bolsters calls for an independent Texas. Texas's standoff with the feds in Eagle Pass is ignoring calls for secession and fears of violence.
The Texas independence cause was one of the few that did not die and was not buried in oblivion following the US Civil War. And yes, it is true that Texas was not very involved in the battles, but it did attempt independence in 1861 when it considered the abolition of slavery a serious intrusion of the federal government into its own affairs. However, with the victory of the North, Texas could not become independent. Nevertheless, little by little, they developed a very marked identity, an identity closely linked to the legacy of the cowboys and to the southeastern United States.
In fact, in the mid-1990s of the last century, a movement known as the Republic of Texas was born, calling itself a provisional government. This movement was created by Richard Lance McLaren, who denounced the federal government on countless occasions for such crazy things as paganism. What's more, in 1997, it even claimed compensation from the Clinton administration of more than $90 billion for damages suffered during the Civil War.
But anecdotes aside, the Texas secessionist legacy is going further, to the point that today we can find news items like these.
Texas lawmaker files Texan bill to spur a vote on exploring secession from U.S. Daniel Miller and members of the Texas National Movement delivered 139,456 signatures to the Republican Party headquarters in Austin. Miller said there were 170,097 signatures in total, but 30,426 were rejected because some forms had been incorrectly completed.
Now, what does the Republican Party have to say about this? Well, it stands to reason that the GOP is not about to include a Texas independence referendum in the political debate, much less to do so in the run-up to the March primaries. And the reason they don't do it has not so much to do with whether they like the idea more or less, but basically because they can't. An 1869 ruling prohibits Texas, or any other state in the country, from unilaterally seceding. In other words, as much as some Texas politicians like Ted Cruz entertain those who advocate the idea of secession, it is nothing more than cheap political talk in an attempt to show their disagreement with Washington. It's a rhetoric that, while strengthened by the Texas standoff with the Biden administration, has little traction. The vast majority of Texans feel very American, and they should, even if they also love being Texans. You know, long live the Cowboys. In fact, it is likely that once all this is resolved, the issue will be buried again and basically limited to very minority environments. So you see, the dreams of the Texan secessionists don't have much to back them up, and will probably remain just that, dreams. But what is not so minor or inconsequential is the tough battle that is brewing between the Republicans and the Biden administration on the eve of the White House, Senate, and congressional elections. VisualPolitik community, things promise to get interesting for better or worse in months to come. For the moment, it's your turn. Do you think tensions between Abbott and Biden will soon calm down, or will they get even worse? Could secessionist rhetoric gain weight in Texas? You can leave your answers down below in the comments. And very important, if you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any uploads. Once again, thank you very much for watching, all the best, and see you next time.